This is continuous coverage.
Continuous coverage. Continuous coverage.
In the trial of Lori Vallow Daybell from the Hidden Killers podcast.
Hidden Killers podcast.
We are now up to segment number 3 of our continuous coverage in the trial of Lori Vallow Daybell. Let's go to the courtroom.
We're back on the record on CR 22-21-1624, State versus Lori Noreen Vallow. The state was preparing to call another witness. We just finished the lunch recess. I'll note the jurors are all present and accounted for. Counsel for the state and defense as well, and the defendant is present. Is the state prepared to call another witness?
Yes, Your Honor.
All right, you can call your next witness.
The state will call Scott Cowden. And, Judge, I believe they are just bringing him up right now, so it may be just a minute.
All right. How do you spell his last name?
Cowden.
Thank you. All right, before we commence with testimony, I'll just inquire of the witness. Have you reviewed or been viewing any part of the trial or the testimony of any other witnesses while this case has been going?
No, sir.
Okay, thank you for that. I'll also note, if you'd please make sure to answer all questions verbally with a yes or no response, and then try to not talk at the same time as anyone that's questioning you so the record stays clear. And with that in mind, Ms. Blake, you can inquire.
Thank you, Your Honor. Mr. Cowden, where are you currently employed?
I work for the Chandler Fire Department in Chandler, Arizona.
And I guess for the record, we'll have you state your full name. I forgot to do that.
Okay, yes, my name is Scott Cowden.
How long have you been employed with the fire department?
Almost 24 years.
And what is your specific title or role in association with the fire department?
I'm a fire engineer, which means you drive the apparatus, still a firefighter, and then also a paramedic.
And do you have training in order to be a paramedic?
Yes, I started out as an EMT, and I went to paramedic school and graduated in 2007.
Do you also teach courses on CPR?
I used to be a CPR instructor for about 12 years, teaching those courses, yes.
Were you working with the fire department on July 11th of 2019?
Yes, I was.
Do you recall being dispatched out to the report of a shooting victim?
Yes.
And, Your Honor, I'm going to object just to make sure on the record that our 404B objection is still noted. My client's not under trial here for anything that happened in Arizona, so we object for relevance.
All right, I've considered that objection. The court's previously taken that issue up on a ruling that was made in February. For the reasons I incorporated into that ruling, and for under 404B, the court does determine that this evidence can be presented with an appropriate limiting instruction. So, Ms. Blake, that limiting instruction has already been provided to the jury and will be provided again at the time of deliberations. For that reason, the objection is overruled.
Thank you, Your Honor. When you respond out, or I guess let me back up. When you responded out on July 11th, where initially did you respond to?
We responded to a residential house for a gunshot wound or gunshot victim.
Did you enter the residence when you initially responded?
Yes.
And when you entered the residence, did you locate the individual that had been shot?
Yes.
What did you observe regarding that individual?
We were led into the house by a Chandler police officer. They were on scene before us, and when you went into that front door, that entry room is where we found Charles laying on the ground, on the floor, on his back, and he appeared to be unconscious as you approached him.
And when you say Charles, did you learn his last name?
Charles Vallow, we did learn. My captain on the crew was documenting the call. He would have been communicating with the Chandler officers who were communicating with other individuals on the scene that would be able to supply that information.
And you eventually learned his identity as well?
Yes.
And you said he appeared to be unconscious. Did you get closer to Mr. Vallow?
Yes, I would have been the first one to actually make it to Charles. And so then you're going to go through that process of kind of doing your assessment and evaluation of him.
And when you were doing the assessment and evaluation, did you notice any injuries on his person?
Yes, there was some blood on his shirt. I had to lift up his shirt so I could find the proper landmarks to be able to perform CPR while checking for his level of responsiveness, breathing, things like that. And he had 2 gunshot wounds.
And had you seen gunshot wounds before?
Yes.
And those were consistent with other gunshot wounds that you'd seen?
Yes.
And when you say that you pulled up a shirt or removed the shirt to perform CPR, did you in fact perform CPR on Mr. Vallow?
Yes, I did.
Did you make any observations as you were performing CPR?
Yes. So based on my experience, both as a first responder, firefighter, and a paramedic, and also a CPR instructor, you have certain landmarks that you're looking for, and we were led to believe that CPR had been started prior to our arrival, communicating with dispatch en route to the scene, monitoring that radio channel. We were led to believe that the caller, the shooter, had started CPR. And so when that happens, if the person is doing CPR and they're doing it effectively in the right place, it's quite common to where you can sustain injuries to the chest. You have to be forceful enough that you're actually going to compress the heart to be able to pump the blood to the body, trying to keep them alive and buy some time for help to arrive. And so typically when that happens, an impression would be left in the area of their sternum, the lower part of their chest, where the hands would have been doing the compressions. And then I didn't see that initially. I started my compressions and I felt what I would describe as like a crunch or a crack. Again, when you're doing it forcefully enough to be effective, you can have injuries occur to the sternum or a broken rib. They could displace from the sternum where they're connected on that chest wall. And so you can feel that occur typically in that first compression or first couple compressions. And I did feel that.
And in your training and experience, if someone had been performing CPR, would you have expected to feel that crack or that crunch?
I would not have expected to experience that and feel that had they been doing CPR and doing it effectively. And
would you have expected to see some kind of an impression had someone been performing CPR?
Yes, and then in fact, when it became appropriate time for me to stop doing CPR, because my colleagues were further exposing Charles, putting a heart monitor on him so we could see if he had any activity with his heart. So I had to stop compression so we could look at that, and I could see the impression that I created and made now.
Have you performed CPR before on individuals that have some kind of an injury to their body that could result in bleeding?
Yes.
And when you were done performing CPR, did you have blood located on your hands or your gloves?
Yes.
Would you have expected to see that if someone had been performing CPR before you arrived on their hands?
Yes.
If I may have just one moment.
Yes.
I have no further questions, Your Honor.
All right, thank you, Ms. Blake. Cross-examination?
Your Honor, since we've previously objected to the entirety of this testimony, we don't have any questions.
All right, that'll conclude the testimony of this witness then. Thank you for appearing and testifying today. Is there any objection to this witness being excused?
No, Your Honor, and we would ask that he be excused at this time.
All right, any objection to his being excused?
No objection.
Okay, you can be excused then, and we'll allow the state to call another witness.
Your Honor, the state will call Detective Werther.
How do you spell that last name?
Werther.
Thank you. All right, before we proceed with testimony, I'll just inquire as to the witness. Have you reviewed or seen any of the trial testimony in this case before you came here to testify today?
I have not.
All right, thank you for that response. And then I'll just advise you to please answer all questions verbally so we can keep a clear court record and try to avoid talking at the same time as anyone questioning you. With those rules in mind, Ms. Blake, you can commence with your direct examination.
Thank you, Your Honor. Would you please state your name and spell your first and last name for the record?
My name is Ariel Werther. That's A-R-I-E-L. Last name W-E-R-T-H-E-R.
Where are you currently employed?
I work for the Chandler Police Department, and I'm assigned to the Robbery Homicide Unit.
What is your current title?
Detective.
How long have you held that position?
As a detective since 2016, but with the Robbery Homicide Unit since 2020.
Do you have prior experience as a law enforcement officer before becoming a detective?
Yes, I was a patrol officer for the City of Chandler. All my employment has been with the City of Chandler.
Do you have any specialized training in order to be a peace officer?
Yes, I attended the Arizona Law Enforcement Academy in Phoenix, Arizona, where I was provided training in order to become a police officer. And then once I graduated from the academy, if I recall, it was a 16 or an 18 week. It's been quite a while. Then I went on the road for a thing called field training, where you are assigned an officer who's been identified as a trainer to teach you how to do the job on the road. Completed my field training, and then I've had advanced ongoing training ever since then.
And did you, Your Honor, I'm going to ask that the court be handed State's Exhibit 43. For the record, it consists of 7 pages. They are printout from a PowerPoint. Defense counsel was provided a copy as well just before we started court this afternoon.
And counsel, could I just have a brief sidebar, please?
Yes.
All right, Madam Prosecutor, before we proceed again, I'll just note we had a brief sidebar regarding the previous rulings the courts made in this case before trial. I did want to just reiterate, since it was some time before I had this instruction. So, ladies and gentlemen of the jury, you've previously been advised that certain evidence may be admitted for a limited purpose. This evidence may be admissible for a purpose such as proving a motive, opportunity, intent, preparation, plan, knowledge, identity, absence of mistake, or lack of accident. However, such evidence is not admissible to prove a person's character in order to show that on a particular occasion the person acted in accordance with the character. You will be further instructed on this point in an instruction that will be provided to you during your deliberations. So with that, Ms. Blake, you had started offering on an exhibit, and if you want to pick up there again, we can continue with your direct.
Thank you, Your Honor. I would ask that the witness be shown that exhibit.
And, Your Honor, just so the record's clear, I continue my objection for what happened in Chandler, Arizona under 404B.
All right, I've noted your objection, Mr. Archibald, and at this time the objection is overruled.
Detective Werther, could you look at that the exhibit you've just been handed?
I've reviewed it.
Do you recognize the images shown on those papers?
I do.
And did you, in fact, create those through a PowerPoint presentation?
I did.
Did you create those based on information that you had obtained?
Yes, I did.
Do you believe that those slides would be effective in assisting you today with your testimony?
I do.
Your Honor, I would ask for the admission of State's Exhibit 43.
Any objection?
Same objection, Your Honor.
Very well. considered that, and based on the court's previous ruling, the objection's overruled, and that exhibit is admitted.
Thank you, Your Honor. Detective Werther, were you working on July 11th of 2019?
I was.
Do you recall responding out to the report of a shooting?
I do.
When you responded out, were you given any specific assignment initially?
I had no specific assignment. For context, at the time I was actually assigned as a detective in the Special Victims Unit, primarily investigating sex crimes. But as a matter of succession planning, it was known to everyone that I wanted to come to the Robbery Homicide Unit. So at times on calls, and this was one of them, I would respond out to essentially shadow and assist with minor tasks, but I was not given primary responsibilities as I was not on the team.
But you were there on scene on July 11th?
I was.
And then the following day, did you have a conversation with another detective?
I did.
And who was that?
Detective Moffat.
At that time, based on your conversation, were you assigned a specific task?
I was.
And what was that?
The task was to call Ms. Vallow, as no one had, as I understood it, obtained documentation information for her son JJ, Joshua Jackson Vallow. As he wasn't present at the scene during the initial investigation, it seemed no one had gathered his name, date of birth, or any of that information.
Did you in fact do that?
I did.
And when you made contact with Ms. Vallow, did she provide any information to you?
Yes, I called her on the phone, and during our recorded call, she provided his basic information to be put in the report, which is fairly standard, as he was said to have been present during the incident. And then we talked about the school to which she had allegedly taken him after the shooting occurred, and she gave me the information for a Lawrence Life Academy, and I later looked up where that was. And she also told me that between leaving the scene of the shooting and going to Lawrence Life Academy, she had gone to a Burger King to get JJ food.
And after you had spoken with Ms. Vallow, did you end up taking on any additional tasks in regards to an investigation?
Yes, the next task that I was given was to actually locate video from the Burger King showing at what time she visited the Burger King.
And did you in fact do that?
I did.
And were you able to determine what time she had gone to the Burger King?
Yes, on that same day I was able to go, and one of my practices which I adhered to in this case is when I'm looking at video evidence, I will ask to see the live view first and see what the timestamp on the live view shows and compare it to the timestamp on my phone in order to show that the time is relatively reliable, which I did in this case. The times matched. Then I was able to see video from the 11th and establish what time she and her vehicle passed through the drive-thru.
And were you aware of what time, or are you aware of what time the initial 911 call was placed regarding that shooting?
The initial 911 call was placed at 8:36 in the morning, if I'm remembering correctly.
So it would have been after Ms. Vallow was at the Burger King?
Well, yes. So what I found on the video is the video evidence showed that her vehicle, and also captured her image through the drive-thru window, that visit was at 7:55 in the morning, 7:54 or 7:55 in the morning.
And Your Honor, I would ask permission to publish the State's Exhibit 43.
You may publish it.
Oh, it's going to be actually on a PowerPoint presentation. And I do have a copy. It's the same slides that the court saw. I do have a copy of a jump drive marked that we will submit into evidence as well.
Okay, thanks for clarifying that. That'll be the formal exhibit that will be admitted into the case.
And in looking at the image on the screen, I'm not sure if it appears on that screen in front of you as well.
It does.
What are we seeing on this screen?
So these are a few locations in Chandler, Arizona, and also in Gilbert, Arizona. The direction indicated in the lower right-hand side of your screen, if you're facing it, shows north to be towards the top of the screen, and there's a mile marker indicating 5 miles for scale to give an approximate idea of the relationship of things. This is sourced from Google Earth Pro, and the locations that I have marked on here using Google Earth Pro from the bottom of the screen up are 5531 South Four Peaks Place, the scene of the shooting, the Burger King, and the Lawrence Life Academy where JJ was dropped off. And then another location we'll speak of in a moment, and which I neglected to put here on the page, but just above and one street over to the west from Lawrence Life Academy, we will talk about a Walgreens location, which is on a slide that will come up shortly.
And, Your Honor, may I ask that the detective be provided with a pointer to just show us that location?
Yes, we'll give him the laser pointer.
I thought that was a pen.
Thank you. If you just want to show us on there the area you were just describing.
Right there is there's a Walgreens at that location, and again, I have a detail that shows it later on in the sequence.
And these are the locations that were provided to you by Ms. Vallow.
Yes and no. The Walgreens is not something we discussed, and I'm not certain if she specified that Burger King to me, but that is the Burger King that I went to where I found the video.
And then if you look at the slide that's being shown right now, could you explain what we're seeing here?
Yes, this is detail for more context. Again, north towards the top of the screen. We're now at a scale that has a 1 mile indicator, and this shows 5531 South Four Peaks, and then about two major streets north of there on the west side is where the Burger King is located at 2865 East Ocotillo Road in Chandler.
And you indicated that the Burger King video showed her there around 7:54, 7:55 a.m.?
That's right. I also obtained a receipt which was timestamped 7:56 for the actual purchase.
And she had indicated to you she had taken JJ to Lawrence Academy.
Correct.
Did you do anything as part of your investigation to try to determine how long it would take to get from the residence where Charles was shot to JJ's school?
Yes.
And what did you learn, or what did you do to determine that?
Again, using data sourced from Google, I evaluated the most direct route as Google provided it, which comes in somewhere between 7 and 8 miles from 5531 South Four Peaks to Lawrence Academy. I was aware that the 911 call came in at 8:36. I was aware the first officer was on scene from body-worn camera that I had reviewed and from the CAD record that he was on scene at 8:42. And I was aware that he had captured Ms. Vallow on recording at 8:48 back at the scene at 5531 South Four Peaks. One of the things we discussed is it didn't seem plausible that a person could drive that distance and back in the amount of time from the 911 call to when she first appeared on body-worn video.
And when you say that you had discussed, do you recall who you discussed that with?
I know I discussed it with Detective Moffat. I may have discussed it with other members of the team as well.
And is that pretty common that you will discuss investigations as a team?
Yes, so that we're sharing ideas and trying to determine the best way to proceed, and so that people aren't going off in one direction without everyone else knowing what's going on. It's the best way to proceed.
And after you'd gone to Burger King and verified that video, did you do anything further with trying to verify locations?
Yes. I did on that same day, I believe, which was the Friday, the day after the shooting. I went and visited multiple CVS locations. I had been told that another detective had information that Ms. Vallow may have stopped at a CVS or a Walgreens, and I think it was originally communicated as a CVS in order to buy flip-flops for the children who had apparently left the house without shoes. I went to, I think, 6 or 7 locations trying to find video and did not find video on that day.
Are you aware if at any point video was recovered of Ms. Vallow at a CVS or a Walgreens, excuse me?
Yes, because I did eventually recover it. It was based on the location data, however, which we haven't discussed yet.
So leading into that, other location data, did you review data from Charles Vallow's phone?
I did.
And is Charles Vallow's phone in possession of the Chandler Police Department?
Last I knew, yes.
And do you know where that phone was recovered from?
I understand that another detective recovered it from Ms. Vallow after the event.
Were you tasked with looking at location data linked to that phone?
I was.
And did you in fact review that data?
I did.
What did you discover from your review of that data?
So if we advance to the next slide, this here is 5531 South 4 Peaks Place with the north indicator again and to scale for reference. What I've added on here are notations with the about symbol. For me, that stands in for approximately. I'm saying at approximately 7:32, what I'm calling CV phone, which is Charles Vallow's phone, arrives in the area of 5531 South 4 Peaks. Now, the location data that we're deriving this from is data that was stored physically on the phone and then extracted by the computer crimes unit and provided to me. This data from the phone indicates that at about 7:32, the phone was in the area of the 4 Peaks Place address, and at about 7:49, the phone left that area. And then the next slide. This is the Burger King at 2865 East Ocotillo Road, again with the north indicator, although I seem to have cropped it out just slightly. This shows that at about 7:54, LV, which is Lori Vallow in my notation, is on video in the drive-thru. That's the video that I obtained and that I reviewed and placed into evidence. Around 7:55, there's location data from Charles Vallow's phone in that area. Around 7:56, Lori Vallow is on video leaving the drive-thru. And at 7:56, Charles Vallow's phone location data also leaves the area. This is that Walgreens I talked about. So if you recall on the first slide I showed, this is the one that was a half block north and 1 block west of the Lawrence Life Academy approximately. This shows that at about 8:15 in the morning, Lori Vallow is on video at this Walgreens. Now, the way I found out about this was by reviewing the location data, noticing that there was a Walgreens there, calling the manager, asking if a person fitting her general description, although I did not provide her name or the reason for my inquiry, only that I was a police detective calling to ask. I asked if such a person came in and perhaps purchased some flip-flops. She located the data, provided it to me, and then the video was placed in evidence. So having reviewed that video, I see that at around 8:15, she is on video entering and making that purchase. I also obtained a receipt for that. And also at around 8:15, Charles Vallow's phone location data indicates that the phone was in that area. At around 8:20, the video at the Walgreens loses sight of Ms. Vallow as she leaves.
And if we go to the next slide, what are we seeing here?
This here indicates that around 8:32, Charles Vallow's phone is in the area of the Lawrence Life Academy, which Ms. Vallow had previously stated she had gone and dropped JJ off at that location after the shooting. And I think, yep. And then if we go to, oh, there it is. So here we have, there's a typographical error. That's my error. That says 7:36. That should say 8:36. There's a 911 call reporting the shooting. The reason that's relevant is we were just at 8:32 at the Lawrence Life Academy, indicating that the phone was in that area. But the 911 call does not come in until 8:36 in the morning. 8:42, as I previously stated, the first officer arrives at the scene. Around 8:47 is the first location data from Charles Vallow's phone, indicating it's back in that area. And at 8:48 on the body-worn camera video timestamp, Lori Vallow appears on that officer's video.
And in looking at the location data with Charles' phone, did you learn who had Charles' phone in their possession?
Not from the location data, but I had been advised by other detectives that the information
I'll object, Your Honor, to hearsay.
I'll sustain that.
You had responded to the scene on July 11th, correct?
Correct.
When you got to the scene, did you ever observe Charles Vallow?
I did.
And where was Charles Vallow observed?
Charles Vallow was in the first room when one enters into the home, and he was laying on the floor, and he was deceased.
Did Charles Vallow have his phone with him?
I never saw his phone.
Did you learn through your investigation whether his phone was recovered on his body?
I learned that it was not.
If I may have just a moment, Your Honor. And I don't have any further questions, Your Honor.
All right, thank you, Ms. Blake. Cross-examination, counsel?
Detective, do you have information as to who made that 911 call?
It's my understanding, although I never had contact with him, that the 911 call was made by Alex Cox.
And did you speak to Alex Cox?
At no point.
When you arrived at the scene, there were other officers talking to Alex Cox?
Yes, I believe so.
And in your investigation, you're not one of the officers who talked to him?
That's right. I did not interview him.
And with the Charles Vallow phone, that the phone itself was going to Burger King and to Lauren's Life Academy and to Walgreens. Is that right?
That's right.
And who else was in the car with Lori Vallow?
I can't know for certain. I know on the video at the Burger King that there was someone in the front passenger seat. It wasn't someone I recognized, and I couldn't tell if anyone was in the back seats of the vehicle.
But would that have been Tylee Ryan that you learned that she was in the car and at that time?
I was told that both of the children were in the vehicle, but I never directly verified that.
Okay. All right. Thank you, sir.
Any redirect?
No, Your Honor. And we would ask that this witness be excused.
All right. Any objection to excusing this witness?
No.
Very well. Detective, you can be excused. Thank you for coming and testifying today.
Thank you.
All right. The state can call its next witness.
Your Honor, the state will call Detective Inclin. That's Ynclan.
Thank you.
Your Honor, I think they're bringing the next witness up. While we're waiting, I did want to clarify with the court that Exhibit 43 was admitted.
It was admitted, and it will just be the file on the jump drive for the jurors.
Thank you, Your Honor.
All right. Before you start on your direct counsel, let me just inquire as of the witness. Have you reviewed any of the trial testimony in this case, watched it or listened to it online or anywhere else?
I have not, no.
Okay. Thank you for that representation. I'll also advise you to please, for our record in the case, make verbal responses to any questions and try to avoid speaking at the same time as anyone that's questioning you. So with those rules in mind, Ms. Blake, if you'd like to inquire on direct, you may.
Thank you, Your Honor. Would you please state your full name?
My name is Cassandra Inclon.
Where are you currently employed?
I am a detective with the Chandler Police Department in Arizona.
How long have you been employed with them?
This month is 22 years.
What is your current position?
I'm a detective assigned to our robbery homicide unit, and I have been there in that unit since 2009.
And prior to that, did you hold other positions?
I did.
And what were those?
So I initially started as a patrol officer, worked primarily weekend graveyards, moved to what was our general investigations unit at the time as a detective out of patrol. that unit morphed into our family violence unit. Stayed in that unit for about 2 years. I then moved into our narcotics and organized crime unit as a detective. I worked there for about 5 years and then moved over to our homicide unit, and I have been there since.
Do you have any specialized training in order to be a law enforcement officer?
So in Arizona, we are post-certified in the state, so it's a state certification. You have to attend an academy. I attended the Arizona Law Enforcement Academy, which is run by Phoenix PD. It's a conglomeration of a lot of different departments that use that academy. You get approximately 480, 500 hours of training in that academy, which once upon graduation, you get a post certificate to be a peace officer in Arizona. And then subsequent to that, you go through a field training program at your agency.
Do you recall if you were working on July 11th of 2019?
I was.
Do you recall responding to the report of a shooting?
I do.
Do you know approximately what time the call came in?
Your Honor, I'm going to object. I'm sorry to keep lodging the same objection, but just to clarify the record, I've previously objected to this witness under 404B Idaho Rules of Evidence.
All right. I appreciate you making the record, Mr. Archibald. Certainly there's a right to do that. It doesn't disturb the court whatsoever if you make a continuing objection, nor should it disturb the jurors if you continue to object. The court has previously made a ruling on this for the reasons that I stated in that ruling and incorporate into this determination to overrule the objection. This evidence pursuant to 404B will be allowed to be presented by the state with a limiting instruction that will be further provided in deliberations. So with that, Ms. Blake, you can continue with your direct and the objections overruled.
Thank you, Your Honor. Do you recall approximately when that call came in?
It was about 8:30, 8:45 in the morning.
Did you respond out at that time?
I did.
Do you recall where you responded?
So I responded to the residents on Four Peaks. At the time that I arrived, patrol had already established a secure area for investigations. Once I responded there, then additional investigative staff, detectives were responding, and then we did some basically task or job assignments.
And is that common practice to have some detectives assign different tasks?
It is.
And when you arrived, at some point did you observe Lori Vallow?
I did.
Was she there when you arrived?
I don't know if she was initially there. At one point while I was outside the residence, I realized that she was standing near a vehicle with one of the patrol officers.
At some point, did you end up making contact with Miss Vallow?
I did.
And how did that come about?
Initially, I walked over and had contact with her and her daughter, and I was moving them over to what we refer to as our care unit. It's a crisis response that is run through our fire department. They can come out and provide various different services. So I was moving them over to their van. It's summer, it's hot, and moving them a little bit further away from the interior scene of the larger scene that we had.
And when you were moving them kind of away over to the CARES unit, had you become aware of Miss Vallow's connection to the shooting victim?
Yes.
And what did you learn that connection was?
I learned that Miss Vallow was the wife of the victim and the sister of the other involved party.
And when you say the other involved party, was that the individual reported to have been the shooter?
Correct.
And did you learn his identity?
That was Alex Cox.
After assisting Miss Vallow in getting moved over to the CARES unit area, were you present when a notification was made to her?
I was.
And what was the notification about?
One of the responsibilities of detectives in our unit is to conduct death notifications to either the legal next of kin or appropriate involved parties. At that time, my sergeant and I decided to provide an official death notification to Lori Vallow in reference to Charles.
And you were present when that notification was provided?
I was.
Do you recall what Miss Vallow's reaction was?
I do.
And what was that?
She didn't have much of a reaction. When she was informed that Charles was deceased, she had responded that she already knew, and made statements that she was present when it had happened, which was new information to detectives, and didn't really appear to have much of a reaction.
And had you made any observations about Miss Vallow's presence or behavior prior to the death notification?
Yes.
And what were those observations?
At the time that I initially saw her, and while I was in front of the residence, she was standing with her daughter near what we later found out was Charles's rental car, in proximity with a patrol officer. She appeared calm, very non-emotional, was kind of hanging out and seemed to be just having kind of some general conversation, not really upset, just kind of, at one point she was laughing, just kind of was standing around.
And this was prior to being notified of the death of Charles?
Correct. That was prior to me moving her over towards the van.
At some point, were you assigned some additional roles?
I was.
Investigation?
I was.
What was your next assignment?
Detective Moffat was assigned as the case agent, which is typical for how we conduct investigations, and I was assigned to do follow-up or more extensive interviews with Lori Vallow and Tylee Ryan.
And was that in part based on the information Ms. Vallow provided about being present?
Correct.
Did you complete the interview there on scene?
No.
Where did you complete the interview?
Lori Vallow and Tylee Ryan were transported by me back to our police station, and the interviews were conducted in what we refer to as our FAC, which is our Family Advocacy Center. It has particular interview rooms set up for victims and witnesses of crime.
And you said you transported both Lori Vallow and Tylee Ryan there?
I did.
Did Ms. Vallow make any statements while you were transporting her?
Statements?
I guess let me ask it this way. Was there any conversation while you were driving Ms. Vallow and Tylee Ryan to be interviewed?
Yes, there was conversation, not specific to the event, though.
And is it typical that you do not discuss the event on the drive?
Yes, we try not to have any discussion. The intention is to, one, conduct an interview in an interview room so it can be recorded and monitored. Also is we typically try, under best practice, to interview potential witnesses or victims separate from each other. So I didn't want to talk to Lori and Tylee together. I wanted to talk to them separately.
Did you make observations about Ms. Vallow's behavior on the drive to the FAC?
I did.
And what were those observations?
Similar to what I had seen earlier. She was calm, unemotional, I would say, not upset. The conversation revolved around Tylee and her school and kind of Tylee's future plans. She was almost nonchalant about the conversation.
When you arrived at the FAC, did you in fact conduct an interview with Ms. Vallow?
I did.
Do you remember approximately what time of day you would have conducted that interview?
I think it was about 10:30 in the morning, before lunch, within a couple hours of the incident happening.
Did Ms. Vallow, in fact, participate in the interview with you?
She did.
And do you recall if she told you anything regarding how she came to live at the residence where you'd responded?
Yes.
And what did she tell you?
She had indicated that they had lived at the residence for just a few weeks, that Charles had rented the house where they were residing, and that they were separated, and that she was living at the house with Tylee and JJ.
Did she indicate anything she indicated they were separated. Did she indicate anything else regarding her relationship with Charles that you recall?
She had discussed at one point that he had gone back to Texas, to Houston, and that at one point that she had ended up going back out there. The way she described it is almost like a reconciliation for the family, and that she had come back to Arizona, and that house had rented because she was going to stay in Arizona. At one point in the interview, she described at one point Charles had taken JJ back to Houston with him, and described allowing that to happen, and then coming back to the rental in Arizona.
And when she talked about Charles having JJ and that she'd allowed it, had she indicated anything additionally regarding JJ's care?
Yes.
And what was that?
She discussed JJ's special needs care. We discussed he had a particular school in Arizona, his services plan, and just kind of all that entails to provide care for him. She had discussed that when Charles took JJ back to Houston, that he didn't have any of those services and have that support. And she made reference to letting him take JJ because he was basically going to figure out how hard it was to take care of him. And then she discussed when she went back to Houston, how she went back for that reconciliation, even though he didn't have any care and didn't have those services set up and things like that, and just discussed how difficult that was and how hard that was to be able to have that, all those things in place for him for his care.
And so she had indicated that Charles would realize how hard it was to care for JJ?
Correct.
Do you recall if Ms. Vallow indicated anything regarding her knowledge as to whether Charles was going to be arriving in Arizona on the 11th?
Yes.
And what did she indicate?
She had indicated that he had contacted her, called her, and said that he was coming into town. She had offered to book him a hotel room because he wasn't going to stay at the house with them, and that they had arranged that morning that Charles would pick JJ up at the house and take JJ to school.
And I guess to back up just a little bit, you indicated she'd mentioned that she had gone to Houston to be with Charles.
Correct.
Did she indicate to you why she was then in Arizona?
That she had left and come back to Arizona, and her description is that they were separated, that the marriage was ending.
So she knew that Charles was going to be in town, and was he, do you know, or do you recall if she indicated when he was going to arrive in Arizona?
She had said that he was coming into town on Wednesday, and that she had offered, like I said, to book him a hotel, and that Thursday morning he could come pick JJ up, I think she indicated at 7:30, and take JJ to school.
And when you talk about that Wednesday, would that have been July 10th?
That was the day before, correct.
And when you say the day before, what are you referring to?
The day before the shooting.
And that was also, would have been the day before you were interviewing Miss Vallow?
Correct.
What did she tell you regarding, or did she tell you anything regarding whether or not Charles had arrived to pick JJ up?
Yes.
What did she tell you with regards to that?
She indicated that he arrived at the house. I believe that she said he was a couple minutes late, and that she had JJ ready to go with his backpack and things like that. She described JJ as being reluctant to go with Charles initially, and that they had gotten JJ out and settled to leave for school. She describes being in the house and that Charles had left his phone inside the house, and that he came back into the house with JJ outside to retrieve his phone.
So Charles came back in the residence without JJ?
Correct.
Did she indicate to you who else was at the residence that morning?
Through the interview, she had identified everybody else that was present at the house.
Who did she indicate was present at the house?
Tylee was home, and then she indicated that her brother Alex had spent the night before at her request.
And did she tell you why she had requested Alex stay the night?
She indicated that she had asked her brother to spend the night because Charles was coming into town, and that she wanted her brother there.
And she said Charles had left his phone in the house and came back to get it. Is that correct?
Correct.
What did she tell you happened? Well, let me back up. Did she tell you who had the phone when Charles came back in?
Yes.
And who was that?
She had the phone when he came back in the house.
Did she tell you what happened at that point?
She did.
And what was that?
She indicated that he became very upset when he saw that she had the phone, that she made statements to him about messages on the phone, and that he was extremely angry and wanted the phone back. And she began to move around. She described being in the kitchen, moving around to basically keep the phone while this argument started.
So she indicated that she kept the phone in her possession.
Correct.
And it was Charles' phone.
Correct.
As she was moving around the house, did she indicate anything else happened?
Yes.
And what was that?
She indicated that at one point, Tylee was in Tylee's room, and that Tylee came out of the room in possession of a bat, and that her brother at one point came out and was observing this situation unfolding.
And she indicated Tylee came out with a bat. Do you recall if she indicated anything happened with Tylee and the bat?
Yes.
And what was that?
She described Tylee basically prodding at Charles. They were Lori and Tylee were in very close proximity of each other in kind of the beginning of a hallway. And she describes Tylee almost like prodding at Charles and almost in defense of Lori, and that Charles ultimately ended up physically taking the bat from Tylee.
And did she indicate what happened after Charles took the bat from Tylee?
She did.
What was that?
She described Charles as being extremely angry, and at one point her brother interceded, coming up behind Charles and basically grabbing him around and pulling him backwards. And she described a physical altercation beginning between Alex and Charles.
Did she indicate whether or not there was any exchange of words?
She indicated that they were fighting, and but not specifically as to what they were saying.
Did she indicate whether or not anyone was injured in that struggle between, or the fight between Charles and Alex at that time?
I don't recall.
After she describes the struggle or the fight between Charles and Alex, did she indicate what happened next?
Yes.
And what was that?
She directed at one point Tylee outside because JJ was outside. So she had directed Tylee outside to JJ, and she had moved through the house into the kitchen, which you would become an ear witness, not an eyewitness, because you can hear but wouldn't be able to see. So she had described moving around and being able to hear what's going on but not seeing what's going on. And she describes hearing one gunshot.
After hearing the gunshot, did she tell you what she then did?
She did.
What was that?
She indicated that upon entry back into the room, she could see Charles down on the floor, and that at that point she made a decision to go to her children. She went outside and described JJ as like coming back towards the house, and at that point she put JJ in the car, and with Tylee left with JJ with the intention to take him to school.
And before she left, she indicated she'd heard a shot and seen Charles on the floor. Is that correct?
Correct.
Do you know where Charles' phone was at that point?
I do not.
At some point, did you later recover Charles' phone?
I did.
Were you informed where it had been?
At the time that I recovered the phone, it was with Lori and Alex in Charles's rental car.
Did Lori, she told you she went outside with the intention to take JJ to school. Did she tell you what she did next?
She did.
And what was that?
She had indicated they left the house. She advised that they actually went through the drive-thru at Burger King because JJ is very fond of chicken fries and Sprite. They went through to get him food and then took him to school. And then her and Tylee returned to the house.
Did she indicate when she saw Charles on the ground if she saw where Alex was?
I believe she mentioned him being in the proximity, but we didn't talk specifically as far as positioning like we would in like a walk-through interview or something like that.
After she left, did she indicate if she received any phone calls?
We did discuss phone calls.
Do you recall what she stated regarding that?
She indicated shortly after leaving the house that her brother Alex had called her and asked her if she had left, and she indicated that she did, that she was taking JJ to school and that he needed to call 911.
Are you aware of any 911 calls being placed by Lori Vallow that morning?
I am not aware of any, no.
She indicated she had her phone with her?
She did.
Did you speak with Detective Moffat about your interview with Miss Vallow?
I did.
Do you know if he had interviewed anyone that morning?
Detective Moffat interviewed Alex Cox.
Are you aware if there were discrepancies in what Alex Cox reported from what Lori Vallow told you?
I am aware, yes.
And are there discrepancies?
There are.
Once the interview was completed, what happened next?
Once the interview with Lori was complete, I conducted an interview with Tylee. And then once Detective Moffat completed his interview with Alex, at that point, myself and Detective Moffat transported Lori, Tylee, and Alex back to the house.
When you transported Lori back to the house, did you make any observations regarding her demeanor or behaviors?
I did.
What were those observations?
So I drove. Detective Moffitt was in the very back. We actually took the victim services van so we could transport all three together. During the entirety of the car ride, she was very calm and put together, very nonchalant about what had happened, not upset, and there was some conversation and chatter about kind of Tylee in school and just kind of mundane conversation, very, very nonchalant about what was going on at the time.
And if I may have just a moment, Your Honor.
You may.
I have no further questions, Your Honor.
That wraps up segment number 3 of our continuous coverage. There's one more segment to go of courtroom drama from the 19th of April, 2023 in the trial of Lori Vallow Daybell. Be sure to press subscribe so you don't miss any of it. I'm Tony Bruschi. Stay with us.
This is continuous coverage
Continuous coverage. Continuous coverage.
in the trial of Lori Vallow Daybell from the Hidden Killers podcast.
Hidden Killers Podcast.